are recording on the 17th of November, and it's been 12 weeks since the government announced they were moving forward the 5% deposit scheme that was supposed to come out in January 26, and they moved that forward to October 25. So we've had a full quarter since that data has come in, and as predicted, the investors have certainly hit the market thick and fast. Investor activity in the last quarter, the Guardian's just released, went up 17.6%, so representing 40% of new applications. Now, again, as investors, we can't control the market, but there's some pretty strong statistics that have come out of that first quarter. John and I did an episode talking about, I guess, there has been a lack of stock and investors wanting to know more about, different areas. We started a series talking about different areas. We've had Kimberly from Envisage in talking about regional Victoria. And we're lucky enough today to have Marcus Davidson from Envisage Property to come in and tell us a little bit more about an area that he works in, which is regional New South Wales. So I'm really excited to get into the episode right now. You're listening to This is Property with Rachelle Kroon, and let's get into the show. Welcome, Marcus.
Thanks, Rach. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Now, you're a buyer's agent. You're on the ground every day in regional New South Wales. Tell us about your journey and how you became a buyer's agent.
Sure. So I won't go back too far, but I did have my own business for a good while and in a totally different industry. But back in the early days when I was in my teens, my parents had a real estate agency. So real estate was kind of in the blood. And skipped it for a few years and then circled back and got into the industry through McLaughlin Real Estate on the Central Coast and was a sales agent there for about 5 years. And then I knew John actually before I was a sales agent and was lucky enough to work with John on selling one of his properties. And that's how we got discussing buyer's agency and buyer's agent. So I had a chat with him. Talks went on for a little while, but then I was lucky enough to join Envisage and been here with John for probably about the last 5 years. And side note, I was the first BA here at Envisage, so I feel like the older brother to everyone. But now we've got a few more BAs on the ground, which is awesome. Business is growing, and happy to be a part of Envisage Property.
Yeah, amazing. So you specialise in regional New South Wales, and I know that a lot of people, and especially a lot of investors, are looking far and wide for suitable properties. I mean, buyers agents have been screaming out about lack of stock. Tell me about regional New South Wales. I'd love to know a little bit more about it. And what distinguishes regional New South Wales from metro markets like Sydney?
Yeah, we love regional. I guess the biggest distinguishing part between regional and I guess what you call cities or even capital cities is really the population and population density. So a lot of these bigger regional towns that we're buying in around probably about 40,000 plus population. So you look then at Sydney or Melbourne and they're 10x that. So and it's obviously probably location as well. So I would say population and location would be the two biggest factors with regional. So the regional places we're buying are a little bit more inland. But there is plenty of regional places on the coast though as well. But we can dive into it later. But there's definitely other factors in why we're purchasing in some of the regional spots that we're in at the moment though. But yeah, answer your question: population and location.
And I guess affordability has got to be a big driver as well.
Of course, yeah, 100%. Affordability is also, yes, a big factor there as well. You can get, and again, we'll probably talk more later, but yeah, house with some land, you can buy there pretty cheap compared to anything in the cities. So
in the metro markets. So tell me, so you do regional New South Wales. What sort of clients do you generally work with?
So predominantly investors. So investors with, let's say, 5, 6, 700, 800,000 would probably be my major client base, and looking for probably that 4.5% yield, maybe even 5% yield, which is still achievable in regional, even though regional is moving and has moved over the last sort of 6 to 12 months. But yeah, mostly investor clients. But I have worked with a lot of owner occupiers. I also look after the Sydney and Central Coast areas as well. So we get a lot of owner occupiers that don't know the areas that need our services to help them purchase in the right areas in those locations as well. But regional, I would say predominantly all investors.
Yeah, so our listeners would be all over the country. A lot of them would know nothing about New South Wales, especially regional New South Wales. Tell me, what are some standout regions of New South Wales? Tell us about a few areas that you work a lot in and that you know a lot about.
Okay, so I look after New South Wales, obviously. So my three main regional areas would be Orange, Dubbo, and Tamworth. That will be the three regions that I mainly purchase in um, for our regional investor clients. Now, that, those areas can change over time. And for instance, it was probably not long after COVID, prices went crazy and we got out of Orange. We weren't buying in Orange. We let that market do its thing for a while. It got too hot and we eased out of that market. But then probably about 2024, end of 2023, we're back in Orange and purchasing in because prices had neutralized a little bit and weren't as hot, and we found better value there. But then Dubbo, we're always in and out of. Um, Still buying there at the moment, but prices have moved, so we've got to be careful there as well. And Tamworth is probably one of our best spots at the moment, mainly for affordability um, and yields. So you're getting some good house on land there, as in over 500 square meter land with a decent house on it, getting 4.5 to 5% yield, which is, you
That's an
know,
exceptional yield.
it's great, and that's why a lot of our investors are purchasing there. And John's obviously got all the data behind that, so it's just not pricing. There's a lot of other factors that go into it that again we can discuss later as well. But yeah, well, me personally, I really like that area just for affordability and yield, and it's growing. It's growing really hot. It seems to be really heating up at the moment, so we've got to be careful there as well. Still low stock and a lot of investors. And as you mentioned, that maybe in the intro, that that first home buyer grant is kicking a few other people into gear to get their own home as well. So that we're probably competing against first home buyers there as well.
Yeah, and look, I just, we did an episode 12 weeks ago now predicting a few changes, and it actually exceeded what our expectations were. But I thought it was really interesting to say that investors did go up 17.6% in that quarter, but first home buyers only went up 2.3%. And I truly believe that that is because it takes first home buyers a little bit longer to get their act together when legislation changes. If there's an opportunity that says, hey, you can get into the market for, 500,000 with a $25,000 deposit, it takes you a while to sort of put things in motion to get planning for that, where investors heard that change and went, bam, we're on. And I think the data just doesn't lie. So tell me, what are you seeing in those markets? Like, if investors are beating first home buyers, are you going to open homes and just they're flooded with a mix? What are you seeing every day on the ground?
I guess I'd also say first home buyers are a little bit more emotional.
Yeah.
So they may take a little bit further to act, a little bit more time to act on a property. So I think as investors, the data's in front of you. You can see the yield, you can see what rent it's getting, you can see how much it's increased over the last 5 years. The data just says it all. So you can act probably a little bit quicker as an investor. So funnily enough, though, we're competing with a lot of investors. So I'm getting feedback. Say, well, there was an open home the other week in Tamworth, and there was 40 parties there, and I think the agent said 3, maybe 4 were first home buyers. So
Yeah,
all the
wow.
rest were investors. So I think the competition between investors and first home buyers is a little bit skewed, and that could heat up even later. Like you said, they may take a little bit longer to act, but at the moment, I think before that grant came in before the 1st of October, there was nearly a mini boom for investors to try and get in before that. So that probably trickled over into then October, November, where we're seeing now, leading into Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot tell you what you had. We had a meeting on Friday, and the topic in the meeting was so many first home buyers are just getting so deflated because they're going to all of these auctions and getting just outbid. And it is at three first home buyers to 20 investors. And it can be really disheartening for people.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, advice of mine is I like to actually see the first home buyers get a property. My job is to buy a property for our clients and mostly our investors, but it's great to see someone buy their first home and get into their first property. So if I ever miss out on property and it's to a first home buyer, I'm not that upset. I'm really happy for them that they can get into the
Oh,
market.
Selma, and look, the last time, and look, to give first home buyers, I know this is an investor program, but to give first home buyers some hope, the last time that investors got to 40% of the market, which they were in the last quarter, APRA actually got involved. And that was in 2014, and they put legislation in to slow the market. So there's always levers that the government can pull, and the levers they pulled in 2014 were things like they made banks have a cap of how many investor loans they could actually give. They stopped interest only loans being able to be, as easy to get, and they made servicing harder for investors. So with that data coming out, I'd be very surprised if there weren't, I guess, some things in the mix to try to give some, reprieve to first home buyers. So first home buyers, I feel like there might be some hope coming your way. Now tell me about where regional New South Wales, that's what we're talking about. Are there any towns or regions you consider to be emerging hotspots? Tell us the goss.
Well, I guess it depends on budget and strategy, outcome, what you're actually looking for in a regional place. So for me, I still think Tamworth is still great value and we are still buying there. And I don't think that's going to change for the next couple of years, to be honest. I think it's just good value and it was already undervalued and hence people are catching on now and getting in there. I looked at some data on Orange as well, which has had a little bit of a downturn. So I would also keep an eye on Orange just because of the proximity to Sydney.
Yeah.
It got really hot, then it cooled down, then we're buying there again. But just looking at some more data, I definitely keep an eye on Orange as well. So that's a little bit more different price point also. So that's probably more around that 7 to 800,000 and probably not quite as much yield. Probably maybe more around that 4 or low 4% yield. So I still don't think, for me, regional New South Wales, Tamworth is still the spot to be in terms of affordability and yield. Yeah, I'd say that's still, for me anyway, that's still a hotspot. If there was no budget, if we're talking no budget and just purely growth, I still love Central Coast Newcastle. If you're going to include Newcastle as a regional spot, look, prices there are over $1 million, but growth there is still really good. Its population growth is going crazy. And I still think Central Coast is getting a little bit slept on at the moment because Newcastle is going so strong that I still think there's some opportunity in Central Coast if you got the budget.
Yeah, so when you talk about budget, and obviously this is my stomping ground. I love Central Coast of Newcastle to invest in personally. But for people who know nothing about these regions, you might be listening from Perth and you're thinking, I'm just going to look to invest using the numbers. Tell me, if you don't know anything about New South Wales, what are the numbers saying? Tell me where's Orange in comparatively to Newcastle, and what are the price point differences?
So I'm with you, Rachel. I'm located on the Central Coast here, so I can tell you how far it takes me to drive each time. But in terms of Orange being closer to Sydney, it's probably about 2 hours from Sydney. Then if you're talking Tamworth is from the Central Coast is about 4 hours, but it's 3 hours to Newcastle, and a lot of people from Tamworth go to Newcastle for their holidays and etc. So it is actually, and because Newcastle is getting so big now, if not one of the biggest regional cities in Australia, then that's also a good thing. I think it's not that far from Newcastle being 3 hours. So Dubbo is a little bit further out. We're talking, 5 hours from the Central Coast. So it is a little bit further out, but we're always looking for those spots that are at least got some access to those city spots. So Orange being closest to Sydney, Tamworth being closest to Newcastle, where you can still get to those city spots. So yeah, so if you are listening in from around the country, it is still a little bit far away, but 2 to 3 hours isn't too bad in my books.
So talking about, I'm just going to pick Tamworth specifically because you sounded the most excited about Tamworth, and I probably have never looked at property in Tamworth. It's not so, like I've seen clients buy there, but I've actually never gone out there and looked at Tamworth. Tell me, if I'm a buyer in Tamworth right now looking for investment, what am I looking at? What can I buy there? And is it Tamworth, or is Tamworth not Tamworth? Because I know Dubbo, and I know Dubbo's not Dubbo. Like there's all different regions in Dubbo. So tell me about Tamworth.
Yeah, look, there's definitely some great spots in Tamworth, and there's not some great spots in Tamworth. So I'm not going to, go too hard on go too hard on the crappy spots either. But so Tamworth is, I think 43,000 population, has a bunch of different industries. There is obviously a little bit of mining there, but they've got agriculture there. The hospital's just been upgraded. The university has just opened a new campus there from Armidale. It's just getting built now. There's an airport there. There's a transport hub there. So the trucks really go through from Queensland to Melbourne. That they go through Tamworth half the time because the planes can get cargo there. Trucks can pick it up on the way through and make their way back and forth up and down the east coast, really. So, and that also brings a lot of people there as well. There's a big abattoirs, there's a big chicken poultry farm as well. So there's so many different industries. There's retail, actually. The retail is actually pretty good there as well. So you think of these regional towns and you think, oh, this is a one street main road. But look, it's actually quite broad. And yes, there is some areas that go out further that we may not invest in. But if I could break it down, being blue chip would be East Tamworth and then North Tamworth, which are really close to each other. They're surrounded by the TAFE, the hospital, are all in that area as well. And you've got the main roads through there, plus the retail sector is all around East and North. If we're going a little bit further out, we've got what we call Central West, which is quite near a nice little golf course there. Do like my golf, so I have to go past that. And so that's a good area, which has actually grown pretty quickly in the last 12 months because it's so close to East and North. And then we've really got, I'd then look at South Tamworth, which is probably the most affordability, but be aware there's certain regions and streets that we don't buy in there because of government housing. So there is some government housing around those areas that, look, if there's one or two government housing in a street, that's not an issue. But if there's a full cluster, then that's something where we wouldn't go near. So so if you were to buy there now, East and North will be your blue chip areas. And then affordability wise, probably more look at Central West to South Tamworth, and then just be aware of and do some research around some government housing areas in that South Tamworth area.
Yeah, but, we had Luke. Yeah. We had Luke Metcalf on from Microverbs a few weeks ago, and he gave us the golden rule for data, which is you've got to be 200 metres from any government housing. Okay. Would you agree with that?
Sure. Look, I wouldn't personally want to own a property right next to a government housed owned one, but I think there's still some of the government housing there has been there for 40 years, and it's had probably what you'd say decent tenants. And so if that's the case, I don't have that much of an issue with it. For me, it's more if there was a block of units there that were all government housing. If there was a row of houses on both sides of the streets, that's when I have an issue. But for me, I get it, 200 metres isn't a bad rule of thumb, but I still wouldn't want to be 200 metres from, a full cluster of government housing either. I'd probably want to be still a little bit further away, to be honest.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, because they were sort of saying like any government housing, but as you said, like blocks of units, or it's very different to a government house that might have a long-term tenant. There are all these micro things you've got to look at when you're looking at a regional town as well.
And if you get a chance, drive through some of those spots, and you'll definitely be able to tell, which ones are possibly government owned.
Now tell me, you haven't given me a price, guys. So tell me, what do I need to buy a house and land? Something that you would consider blue chip house and land in Tamworth.
Yeah,
what's my budget?
In Tamworth, you're only just getting in at, like, I wouldn't want to have much under 500. So
Okay.
You can still just get in there for 500 now. It is getting more difficult. Things have moved. So probably 2 years ago it was 400. So that's how much the market has moved. But if you wanted a slightly better asset and you had a bit more budget, then that 600 to 700 would probably be more of a sweet spot for me. Probably knowing that you may only get that 4.5% yield, or maybe slightly under, which is still pretty good, I think. So that's with house with, say, 600 square meter land, it could be brick. There's obviously still weatherboard homes out there as well. They're a bit of a mix of both. We have clients that tend to prefer brick. Me personally, I don't mind too much, but yeah, I think 500 will probably be your minimum.
Okay.
Because then you're getting into worse areas there. So 600 to 700 would be great sweet spot.
So if you're an investor out there and you've got a budget of $500,000 to $600,000, there is hope out there for you.
There is hope, and it is hot. But yeah, if you engage the right people to help you, then you can definitely find the right help.
No, we might have a break, and I'd like to come back and ask you a few different questions about buying regionally specifically and some things to look out for.
Sure.
This is Property is brought to you by Sphere Home Loans. Sphere Home Loans is a mortgage broker that helps our listeners all around Australia. So, if you want to get into your first home sooner, looking at upgrading, an additional property, or want your current mortgage reviewed, just search Sphere Home Loans or click the link in the show notes, and their dedicated brokers will be able to help you wherever you are. If you are, however, after personal financial advice, don't get it from a podcast. If you would like help based on your own personal situation, head over to moneypodcast.com.au, click Get Help, and we'd be happy to introduce you to one of our trusted professionals. That's moneypodcast.com.au and click Get Help.
We are back with Marcus Davidson from Envisage Property. He's a buyer's agent on the ground every day buying houses for investors in regional New South Wales. I have a question for you, Marcus. What are there any, we talked about regional towns, but what type of property do you think performs best in regional New South Wales? Is it houses, duplexes, units, or acreages?
So regional, definitely houses. We've always looked at houses. Let me just say a side note to that, though, we have just started looking into units, maybe townhouses in closer to that blue chip area, because prices have moved so much that we think the units and townhouses may not have moved as quickly with those. So we're starting to see some pretty good value there. Taking into consideration there could be strata fees in that, so your net yield could come down a little bit. And that's something we're very aware of and we discuss with our clients. But for me, my bias is definitely house with some land, 500 to 600 square meters. Again, my bias is towards add value properties, or even properties with bigger land with subdivision potential, maybe granny flat potential, which is becoming a lot more popular in regional areas as well. Something that you have an option to do something with the house. Now, whether you do anything to that house or not, it doesn't matter, because say you're going to sell it in 10 years. If you've done something to it and added value, then great. If you haven't, the next person that comes along has got that opportunity to be able to go, okay, I can now know I can subdivide this property if I want. I might be able to put a granny flat on it if I want, or I might be able to change the bathrooms or kitchen or whatever it may be. So that tends to be my biases. So all our clients are different. Some clients prefer a set and forget. But some do like that add value opportunity. But yeah, for me, house and land is still the most performing asset in regional New South Wales.
Everyone knows I love a dual lock or dual lock potential.
Who doesn't? Potential. You just want the opportunity.
Tell me, but when you get into different asset types, what about rental demand? How does that change between different property types?
So again, going back to where you're buying in. So you always want to attract the right tenant as well and right long-term tenant. So you don't really want to buy in that area where there might be some government housing around and you're just not attracting the right tenant, or you've got a property in a pretty good location, but the condition of the property isn't great. So are you going to then do some cosmetic stuff, maybe some flooring or painting, just to spruik it up a little bit, then to be able to attract that right tenant for that property? So at the moment, and I just had a look, I think last night, the vacancy rate's around 1% at Tamworth, which is great. I did look back over the 5 years. The most it had ever got was high 2%. And I actually still think that's great for a regional area, because I'm sure you may have seen it before, but you can get 5% plus vacancy rates in some of those areas. So to be, 3% and under over that span is great. And rental demand is still high in that Tamworth area.
And that's because of all of that infrastructure and all of those industries.
Population's growing. So that's one thing we always look at. That's one data point John loves about. So definitely look at population. Those people need somewhere to live. Maybe they're in the health system and they're a doctor or nurse and they just need a rental for the next 12 months while they're doing their thing at the hospital, or, where they've come there to work at the mines for a little while, whatever it might be. The rental demand always seems to be high in the bigger regional areas. So, you've got to have that population growth and you've got to have that decent population. And then, usually the rental market is pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, regional areas can get a bit of, negative press sometimes. Tell me how you, I guess, navigate situations where a town is industry dependent, or what do you think might be some of the overlooked risks specific to regional towns as opposed to these metro centres?
Yeah, so that's one big risk if it's a one-horse town, if it's just mining, if it's just agriculture, whatever it might be that's keeping that town together. We tend not to invest there, and that's all goes on the back of John's data. We don't look at those spots. If you're talking about other risks, you definitely have to look at flood and bushfire risks. So flood has changed a lot over the time, being there has been a few floods around, not only in New South Wales but over Australia, where council are sort of wiping their hands a little bit with it, in terms of what they put on the contract. So with our clients, we mostly just tell them, go get an insurance quote, or we can do an insurance quote. You get a quick insurance quote. If it's, $1,500, $2,000, happy days, we're good. If it's, $3,500, $4,000 plus, then there's an issue there with the insurance company, and they probably do better research around that than us, and they want to cover themselves. So it's easy enough to just go get an insurance quote. But that would be one risk I would say about maybe buying in a regional area to make sure about that. And also the other risk is they're always got to be, for us anyway, and for our clients, it's got to be a long-term hold as well. We're not here to put you in an area for 6 to 12 months and make you $100,000. It's that long-term steady growth that you get in regional that, it's not as up and down as like the city areas. So you can just get that slow, steady growth, both with market value and market rent value. And it just ticks along and does its thing. So the risk would be just buying in there and getting out too quickly. You got to give time to let it do its thing.
Yeah, so maybe regional more so than some of the metro, you're looking at long-term blue chip investments.
100%. It's just because, it's not so much about timing the market there either, because it's just steady growth. Everyone talks about timing the market, and so I don't think anyone can. But let's say you're buying in a more of a city area, you're guessing at what the property clock is actually doing. You can have a bit of an idea, but you don't really know, and you don't know the top or the bottom. So that can go up and down a lot more than what a regional area can do.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to jump back. When you're talking about insurance, I just needed to tell you something. A client of mine was looking in northern Queensland over the weekend, and I always say to get a quote before you make an offer on a property. And so the average house and contents insurance for an investor is about $2,700 a year in Australia. Guess what the quote they received was, just for a normal 4-bedroom house? in Cairns?
Where? How far north? Very far north.
Cairns. It was Cairns.
Cyclone.
Cairns.
5.
5-2, but yes, so close.
There you go.
I'm so glad.
Crazy.
I just said, and we always say, and we had another one recently where they were looking at a property and we'd said to get an insurance quote, and there was another property that they were looking at. It was 2 streets away, and the quote was fine. But we always say make sure you get a quote for the specific address. Well, the address, even though it was only 2 streets away, was $1,000 more in premium a year.
Wow. That's
crazy. So it's really important that you do consider that. But Back to regional New South Wales, Queensland, make sure you're checking your insurance premiums. What is your outlook for regional New South Wales in the next 3 to 5 years?
Regional still good, still steady growth. Look, it is low stock there now, pretty competitive there now at all the regional spots that we spoke about today. So it's just not Tamworth. Dubbo, although that data on Orange seems to indicate that could be a good spot at the moment. But I think it's just going to be still fairly strong growth over the next 6 to 12 months. And then I think it will settle down a bit and just do its thing. It just seems to be, like I said, low stock, more competition, first home buyers, etc., all coming into the market all at once. I think if you can get in like now, great. If if it's 6 to 12 months later, I think if you're holding it long term, it's not going to be an issue. It's just going to do its steady little growth thing. And if you get a property where you can add value or even subdivision potential, well, then you can create your own little increase in the market value there as well.
Yeah, and with yields like that, they mustn't be as hard to hold as some other properties.
Yeah, and that's half the strategy behind what John does. We don't want to put any clients in financial stress. They've got to be able to afford the property. John puts buffers into the strategy as well. So having that yield definitely helps with, people's peace of mind, really, that they don't have to put in too much per week to hold this property. And if it was not rented for a couple of weeks, it's not going to break the bank. So, good yields.
Yeah. So how do you think, so the areas that you're focusing on, so Dubbo, Orange, Tamworth, what infrastructure projects do you think have future growth? Are there things that are coming up that you think, these are, the reasons where you think these areas are going to perform so well?
Yeah, so firstly, you want a good council that are going to spend money in their local LGA. So make sure you check in with council about that. But for instance, Tamworth have just redone their hospital, which is amazing. And most councils are good, and it's important to spend money on those hospitals. But it also does bring more doctors and nurses and health staff into that area as well. So that definitely helps that area as well. So the hospital's just been redone. The transport hub's being done there at Tamworth. I'm going to talk more Tamworth because that's where I've been
love
recently.
Tamworth. Have you invested in Tamworth?
Yes. Yes. Well, both myself and, should I mention John, we both own property there. So we backed ourselves into where we are purchasing with our own purchases there. So, yeah, I was lucky enough there to buy a couple of years ago. So my property's done quite well. But I'm there for the long term. I'm sitting on it. I don't intend to do anything there as well. And because of the infrastructure that is happening there, I can see that the place is going to only keep going. Like having an airport there is great, that people can get there. The Tamworth Country Music Festival is crazy. It goes crazy for a couple of weeks in January. So that's always great. And it does bring a lot of people into town and go, oh, look at this place. So if the council, and it's well looked after area. So I think the university will definitely help as well. So that's actually just started to come out of the ground now. So that's right in East Tamworth as well. So
is that Armidale University? Did you say
that's a campus from Armidale University. So that's now going there. So that's definitely going to help the area as well. And there's a fair few developments when you're looking around the place. Renovations happening. A couple of houses getting knocked down at once, and villas or townhouses getting built. I feel that's always a good sign that the place is doing pretty well if people are spending money there and want to spend money there as well.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm going to ask you a couple of case studies. I always love to know when we're talking about different areas, tell me some case studies that you've had in different areas and how they've performed, and what sort of, give me a few things that you've actually bought for people and how they've gone. You can use your own if you like.
I'm glad you gave me a heads up on this one. I did write a few down, but the first one I'll talk about is Tenambit, which is Maitland area. So I haven't
Okay.
really discussed.
No,
Maitland,
we did not.
and Ben Corley, our other great BA that works with Envisage, tends to look after that a little bit more. But the Tenambit property I bought in 2021 for 420,000. It had a rent of 400 at the time, which is now increased, but is now worth 750 plus, and that was in 2021. So that's 40% growth. It was a neat brick set and forget property that's done really well over that time. And as we briefly touched on, that Newcastle Maitland area is going crazy. So so that's done really well. But that was back in 2021.
I'm going to ask Ben to come on and talk about Maitland.
Grab Ben. he loves the chat. And the next one I will talk about a Tamworth property. I bought in 2023 for 275,000. Believe it or not.
275,000.
275,000.
What sort of property was it?
So it did need a little bit of work, but this client was up for it. So it was an add value property, which I tend to love anyway. But it also had 800 square meter block, and the house sat right on the front left hand side of it. So it had all the side part to be able to put another dwelling on if this client wishes to do so in the future, which they haven't yet. But they spent $25,000, so they're all in for 300. It's worth now 450, and I'd say that's conservative at the moment. So that was in 2023. So 2 years later, 40% growth in 2 years, with a 7% yield.
Yeah, wow. I have to admit, when you were talking about Tamworth, because I don't know the area, I was not expecting that kind of. I was expecting the yields, but I probably wasn't expecting that kind of increase in value.
That's probably the cheapest property I've bought there too, I'd say. That was a couple of years ago. You can't get in there now. Like I said, 500's even getting difficult now. But funnily enough, this was East Tamworth, which is a blue chip area. However, it was just a bit out of East Tamworth. So that's probably one of the best buys I've ever purchased. So I was really happy with that client, and still got opportunity down the line to do something to that property if they want. Or if they just sit on and leave it as is, they're doing fine anyway.
Yeah, 800 square meters. There's certainly a lot of room to move, isn't there?
Yeah. So that's probably my best Tamworth one though.
Yeah, nice. Any others you want to share with us?
There was one I did write down. I do a little bit in Sydney, but I did purchase one in Concord. It was a semi-detached. Yeah. So I know we're talking more regional today, but I do look after Sydney area as well. And this was a great client. So I purchased in 2023 for 1.54 and is now worth 1.9 million plus, which is 20% growth in 2 years as well, which I think is pretty good. Sydney's always seems to be on the rise. Always seems to be a warm to hot market there though. But just in a couple of years, that's 400K in a couple of years. So.
It is a lot. Tell me, do you know off the top of your head what that property rents for?
That was an owner-occupier.
Oh, okay. Because I'm thinking...
I mixed that one up. Sorry. Yes, that was an owner-occupier, that one. Tend to be our Sydney clients are more owner-occupied. If not, that might be more around the mill with apartments or units and stuff like that. So...
it's just that cost to hold, right?
100%. Yeah, it is like that at that pricing. Yeah, it's very difficult to get. You'd probably be looking at $800 a week. 2.5-3% yields. It's just very hard to hold on to unless you're a high income earner.
Yeah, amazing. Now I've got some quick fire questions for you.
All right, hit me with them.
One regional area in New South Wales you would not invest in.
We briefly discussed it, but those one-horse towns, the mining towns, I just wouldn't be going into those towns. Now, while they do good at certain stages, if the mine packs up or moves on, then you're not left with much, and you just don't get much growth either in those areas. I think I wrote down Broken Hill for one, but that's in the middle of nowhere. So you've got to have a reason. Where you invest, there's got to be a reason why you're investing there, and it's got to be for us, you've got to have growth. Yield is always great, but if you don't have growth, you can't keep moving forward. So definitely got to have like population growth, rental growth, but obviously you've got to have your house growth as well.
All right, most underrated market in regional New South Wales?
Underrated. I'd still stick with Tamworth. I know we've talked about it a lot.
You love Tamworth, like I love a Geelong.
I'll put on the back of that Orange though. I would like to circle back to Orange too, because just seeing it slow down a little bit there, I would find that might be some opportunity there in Orange. And I don't know if we include Central Coast as regional, but and we're both on the Central Coast, Rachel, but
Coasties.
I feel like Central Coast is getting slept on a little bit. So I still think there's good value here. Again, budgets are totally different. If we're talking solely investor and you've got the budget, 100% because you've got the growth. But if you still need to be able to, hold on to that property and service that property if you are an investor. But even if you're an owner-op, I'll be a bit biased at Central Coast at the moment too.
I'd probably throw Lake Macquarie in there.
Lake Macquarie is great. Yeah. I love Lake Macquarie. What's good about Lake Macquarie is that it's waterlocked. You know what I mean? You've got the lake and you've got the ocean. You can't create any more land.
Yeah.
So it's only ever going to go up, I think. But I do love Lake Mac too.
One due diligence check investors always forget.
Due diligence. I would say one thing that I find that happens with our clients sometimes, hopefully not much, but the appliance checks. Checking your oven, your stove, and your range hood, and your fans, and your air conditioning. A lot of people don't check this before it goes unconditional, where you don't have a say on what can actually go into that contract. So once you get past unconditional, you're buying the property as you inspected it, as you bought it. So when you get to your final settlement inspection is what we do a couple of days before the property settles, and we're going around and we check the appliances and, the oven doesn't work. Was it noted? Was it put into the contract? Was it picked up in the pest and building report? So that would be one thing I would probably say due diligence wise is to check your appliances before it goes unconditional. I'm making note.
So before you exchange and become unconditional, because when you do that pre-settlement inspection on the day before settlement, the only thing you're checking is that it was in the same condition as when you inspected it. So if the aircon didn't work when you put an offer in, it doesn't have to work when you do your pre-settlement.
Correct. And there's no reason to hold up settlements for that. And we've tried, but exactly what you just said, Rachel, if you don't do your due diligence at the start though, and make sure that gets checked, in that cooling off period where you do have a say, then you're buying it as is once the settlement comes around.
I think you might have answered this already, but red flag for a small town.
Yeah, well, one-horse towns, mining towns. Population, as in population negative growth or whether it's going backwards there, I would say that's a red flag. Like I said, it's got to have a multiple industries there to cover it. So if one industry isn't going great, the other one's picking up the slack there. So I think you've got to have multiple industries in a regional town to make sure it keeps growing.
And I'm laughing at this one because I know the answer because I've realised that you might have already uncovered this. But if you had $600,000 today to invest in regional New South Wales, where would you pick?
Yeah, you know it. They're a big T. Yeah, you can. I'd almost buy there again. It's still pretty good, but I think still Tamworth for the 600K with house with some land, can't go wrong.
Yeah, well, I
hope I haven't just flooded the market. I hope Tamworth's not flooded.
I tell you what.
Sorry, John.
But I think regional areas, especially when you're buying out of state, people need to know about it. When we talked to Kimberly about, Victoria, I've never bought there. I haven't spent a lot of time there, so it's like she's taking me through towns that I have no idea about. I've seen places like Shepparton, on contracts, but I haven't actually walked through it and been there. So it's really different if you're buying out of state to talk to someone who's been to the areas, who's walked and felt it. And so I just think it's so great. And, hearing how passionate you are about the towns you're buying in, I mean, that's what you want. You want to have somebody that knows everything about it if you're going to buy in a place you know nothing about.
100%. And yeah, funnily enough, though, because we have been buying in these regions so long, we've really become friends with a lot of the agents. You know, they send you Christmas gifts because we've been there for so long. Those relationships are built over time, which is for us one advantage for what we do. But it's also nice because it's a nice regional area that really care about the people. And honestly, real estate and, you know, whether it's sales or purchases, it's really about relationships and having those good relationships where you can have honest communication, and you know, we're all trying to get a job done, but we also want to do it in a nice manner as well. So
yeah, and I mean, it must help you having been a sales agent when you're, I guess, you know, you're working with these sales agents. It must help that you've done that same job as well.
Oh, 100%. I think that's one of the best things, that I was the sales agent for 5 years and understand the lingo and understand, you know, certain terms that, and even when you're putting in offers of how to, you know, write those offers properly, to make but to help an owner or vendor make a decision on selling that property under these terms. So, and just the lingo as well. And yeah, I understand that a sales agent is only trying to do what they can do for their client. And me as a BA or any BA is only trying to do what they can do for a client. So at the end of the day, we both want the same thing. Yes, I want it as cheap as I can. They want it as most as they can. But at the end of the day, we can definitely work together and at least, you know, have a decent relationship where it's just not, you know, back and forth of games really. So yeah, I'd rather just honest communications. If they're not going to accept this offer, let's move on and go to the next one.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that data on regional New South Wales. I hope everyone got a lot of insights from that, especially people that aren't based in New South Wales. If you're watching us on YouTube, hi. You've been listening to This is Property. My name is Rachelle Kroon. We've had Marcus Davidson from Envisage Property. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Rach.
Any information given in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and you should seek your own property advice before acting on anything you may hear in this podcast. If you want to start or advance your property education journey, John Pidgeon's book, Sort Your Property Out and Build Your Future, is available where all good books are sold, or via the link in the podcast show notes. Opinions or comments from any guests on the podcast are theirs and not those of the hosts, the publisher, or their respective license holders.